Cars are more or less essential to everyday life, and there is a dizzying range of car finance options available on the market. As if that's not confusing enough, being Muslim adds on an extra layer of complexity by trying to figure out if what's being offered is halal or haram. But don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, because in this video, we're going to help you navigate the dizzying world of car finance and what's halal and what's haram. And in the end, we're going to leave you with a beautiful car that you have got using entirely sharia-compliant means. I'm Ibrahim Khan. I've been studying economics and traditional Islamic sciences for over 13 years now. I've been lucky enough over the years to have been covered by various publications and have authored a book on halal investing. IFG started with my co-founder Mohsin alongside our legal careers in the city. Today, IFG is, alhamdulillah, a team of 20 plus people, and we serve the community through IFG, our content arm, and Curate Capital, our investment arm. We'll cover the best route, usually when buying a car, perks of financing a car, the different types of car finance contracts, whether they're halal or haram and why, and then alternatives to the standard car finance contracts available. Now, before you even think about going down the finance route, consider buying in cash. If you have the savings to buy in cash and you can afford to spend that money, then buying in cash could make a lot of sense. The reason is because you'll end up paying around 4 to 10% APR on any car finance.
APR stands for annual percentage rate, and it is the finance charge expressed as an annual rate. That simply means if you borrow £1,000, you'll be paying between £40 to £100 extra back every year.
Thanks for that, Khizr. So it's much better for you in this situation to pay using cash and avoid paying that £40 to £100 extra per £1,000 that you are borrowing. The only situation where it's better to go for car finance is if you can find an investment that will yield you more than you will save in the car financing cost. So for that to happen, you would need to find an investment returning more than the, let's say, 6% APR that you're paying every single year, which is not always easy to find. Now, another route to consider is the 0% credit cards. If you're confident you'll be able to pay them off before having to pay any of the interest associated with these cards, then that's a very clever way of getting an interest-free loan to pay for your car. Do note though that you will often have to pay an admin fee to get access to these interest-free credit cards. And that's fine from a Sharia perspective, as it is just an admin fee, but of course, commercially, it is money that you have to part with, so do factor that into your calculations. Sometimes a company may offer you a finance option due to the additional perks that come with it. Dealers get paid handsomely by finance companies, so you want to make sure when you are using them that you definitely need it. However, if you can pay the entire amount the week after without incurring any actual financing cost and get all the perks they might be offering for taking that finance, then that's all fine. Now, the first type of car financing we will cover is HP, not the source, also known as hire purchase contract. A hire purchase agreement involves you paying a deposit on the car, with the remaining amount being purchased by the lender. To give you a clear example, Afzal buys a Mercedes on a 3-year hire purchase deal. The total purchase is £30,000 and he pays a 10% deposit, i.e. £3,000. Now the balance is £27,000 and the financing is at 4% APR. So he will have to pay £28,000, £666 and 40 pence over the next 3 years for the car to be his. Afzal will have monthly payments of say £500 per month for the next 3 years. Thus, at the end of the 3 years, he will have £10,668 and 40 pence left to pay. He'll also have to pay any transfer fee, usually a nominal amount. Now, the car ownership will then transfer the car to him. Alternatively, Afzal could choose not to pay that £10,666 and 40 pence and simply hand the car back to the dealer. So hire purchase agreements are at their core a lease agreement, and you are essentially paying rent for the car with the option to buy it fully at the end. The Islamic Fiqh Council have opined on hire purchase agreements previously, and their important conclusions were: point 1, if there is a clear and separate agreement at the conclusion of the hire purchase agreement to purchase the car, that is fine. This doesn't necessarily mean a separate contract, by the way. It just means that there is a standalone contractual arrangement on what happens at the end that is unrelated to the hire aspect at the start. Point 2, if the leasing company promises to just gift the asset away to the buyer upon the lease expiring, that's also perfectly fine. Point 3, it should be a real lease and not just a cover for what is really a sale that is going on. Every hire purchase agreement is different, so it's important to read it carefully, but in principle, hire purchase agreements should be permissible. But the things to watch out for include the lender must own the car. You can't own it, because if you own it, then it isn't a rental agreement, it's a loan. Next, there needs to be a clear option agreement or clause that needs to be exercised at the time, and there must be a clear way to walk away from the deal as well. There must also be a clear separation between the hire aspect of the contract and the purchase aspect of the contract. Ideally, if it is handled through two separate documents, that's great, but that isn't essential as long as it's clear that there are two clearly separate things going on and at play. Now, if the insurance is also paid for by the financing company, even if they increase the price to cover this, that is better, but this is not something that would change the permissibility of the contract as a whole. You can't sell or modify the car without a finance company's permission, by the way. This is helpful from an Islamic analysis as it confirms that the ownership is with the financing company. Also note that under the Consumer Credit Act, you can actually walk away from the hire purchase agreement and just hand the car back to the dealer once you've made half of your payments. Sometimes agreements try to carve this out, but if this is not carved out, that alone really helps the Islamic analysis because it shows that this is a genuine hiring agreement that is going on. A note on entering into a contract that on the face of it has interest rate and APR coming up every so often. Islam doesn't look at words, it looks at what is going on in the contract. And here, what is going on is a straightforward hire and then a purchase. Yeah, I know it's been couched in these financing terms that is how the financing companies like it, largely because they're just used to it, the law is developed around it, and it's all very predictable and understandable. But the interest rate is fixed and it's being worked out on the basis of the car's value, not even the base rate or LIBOR or anything else, by the way, which in the fiqh sense means that it's not riba according to the definition of riba that our scholars have historically used. PCP stands for Personal Contract Purchase, and it's another type of car finance agreement. They're structurally similar to a HP agreement that we've just discussed in that you pay a deposit and you effectively hire the car from the financier until the end of the term. Typically, they are cheaper than a HP though, as the finance is based on the value of the car at the start minus the value at the end. That means that you are not financed to the full value of the car, so the payment is actually cheaper. So the difference with the HP is that under the surface, under the hood, I actually think both are very similar, but the subtle difference is that typically with a HP, you are very much going into it to buy the entire car, whereas with a PCP, you're very much going into it with the option of if you're going to buy a car or not, or if you're going to hand it back. Typically, hire purchase agreements are better for people with worse credit history because they're expected now to buy the entire car, whereas PCPs are more accessible for people with better credit histories. The reason people go for PCPs is that with the PCP, you are guaranteed a future value of the car. So if the car happens to be worth more than that amount, you can use that as an equity for your next car. The whole process also works for dealers as well nicely because it gets people into this habit of having to switch cars every so often. The thing that throws people off when they initially read these contracts, and because it's written in loan agreements and uses terms like interest rates and APR, it does come across as haram. However, there are a few crucial details to remember. Again, the Sharia does not look at the form of the agreement, it looks at the substance. You can call something profit, but if it is interest, then the Sharia would say this is haram. Similarly, if you can call something interest, but if it's actually not Islamically defined as riba, the thing is actually permissible. Of course, it is better to still be cautious and read the contract whenever interest is mentioned to make sure and completely avoid it as much as possible. Now, again, like with the HP contract, the rate of the interest that is charged charged is a fixed amount. It's not pegged to some other kind of rate. And every single explanation of a PCP or a HP contract explains that economically these agreements are hire agreements where the financier owns the vehicle until the end of the term, and the payment you are making is a lease payment. The slightly subtle difference is that when it comes to a PCP contract, because it's being worked out on the basis of the value of the car minus the residual value at the end of the term, from a bank's perspective, they are treating this as a loan. But the crucial difference between a loan and the hire of an asset is the ownership of the asset. Under a loan, you, the borrower, own the asset. You just owe the financier the money you used to pay for the asset. But under the hire of an asset, you do not own the asset, and you're just paying the owner monthly for the right to use the asset. With a PCP, you very definitely do not own the car. So at a very high level, a PCP contract should be Sharia compliant. However, as with all these things, the devil is in the legal details. So always get these agreements checked over by Islamic finance specialists and scholars. Under a PCP agreement, you are usually allowed to part exchange your vehicle in at the end of the term and upgrade to a newer car under a new PCP. There is a technical problem with this, as the payments you will have been making so far will have been this initial deposit and then the monthly payments that you are making. But the monthly payments that were being made were rental payments because you were benefiting from the car. But now you're kind of benefiting from those payments as effectively a big deposit on the car, and you're purchasing the car with effectively accrued equity in the car as well, i.e. all of that money is kind of seen as a down payment on a portion of the car.
Equity simply means you own a stake in a thing. So an equity payment means you're slowly buying up a percentage of the car each time, versus a rental payment, which is essentially paying for usage of the car.
Thanks, Kizar. So in this scenario, which type of payment is it? Because it's an equity payment, that looks to me like you are increasing your ownership in the property, and that brings it closer to the loan picture. But if it is pure leasing and you're not building up equity in the car, then that is closer to the hiring picture. And look, there is an incredible diversity in the market on how refinancing a PCP is handled, so it is hard to give precise guidance. Typically though, this is usually a non-issue, as your lease payment is just treated as a hire payment and doesn't give you any actual legally extra equity in the car. Now, in the rare situation where you do actually get some kind of equity stake in the car, I would construe it as you still making those rental payments every single month for the car, and that this economic benefit that you're getting for those monthly payments is effectively just a gift from the dealer to incentivize you to go for this kind of big balloon payment at the end to purchase the car off them. So we've covered HP, PCP, and now onto the final one, PCH. PCH is short for personal contract hire, and these are uncontroversially Sharia compliant. This is basically a long-term version of you renting from Hertz or Enterprise or Avis. You don't have an option to buy the car outright at the end to muddy things, and you're literally just paying for the use of the vehicle. And at the end of the contract, you just give the car back, that's it. There are alternatives to these three contract types out there for those of you who are looking to finance a car. Websites like this one offer 0% APR on car finance, and what they have done is they've taken all of that additional APR that you would have paid over 5 years in a standard HP or PCP contract, and they've just added it onto the value of the car, and then they've divided up that full payment over the same 5 years. These options are typically more expensive, especially on second-hand cars. Where they're often quite attractive though is when a car manufacturer such as Toyota, I know, did this for a while. They offer something very similar when you're dealing with a Toyota car. Then it can often be a great option from a financial perspective as well. In any case, 0% APR deals are almost always fine from an Islamic perspective. My take on the financing offered by people like Interest Free for Cars and others is all they have done is taken the word interest out of the agreement to make Muslims feel better. And as I have suggested in this video, many Islamic scholars don't think that the substance of a HP or PCP agreement is necessarily un-Islamic in any case. So whether or not the term interest is in the contract or not is just a cosmetic issue in my humble opinion. The real issue is in the substance, and that is, in principle, in our humble view, fine. However, there are a few key ways one could make a HP or PCP agreement more Sharia compliant. For example, the financier could pay for the insurance cost of the car, or in a situation where the customer has defaulted and the financier has pursued for the repossession of the car and got it, the financier should not be allowed to continue to sue for the remaining amount that is outstanding until the end of the contract, because now the person doesn't actually have the car anymore, so they're not going to be leasing it any longer. They're not making any payments for the use of the car. They're making payments just for the finance cost of the car, which we definitely want to avoid. We could also make the contract less financy by getting rid of terms like interest and putting it in other terms. And I know that I said that the Sharia looks at the form, but it is generally better to avoid getting people confused if we can just use terms that everyone can understand and Muslims get comfortable that this is not in fact interest that we are dealing with. As ever, folks, remember that we have hopefully done some educated and well thought out research on this subject and presented that to you, but we are not muftis and this is not a fatwa. So if in any doubt, always talk to a scholar that you trust and do your own research. Final thing, which of these financing structures do I personally use? None of them. I bought my second-hand Toyota Prius in cash. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.